If you've watched Julia Kristina's video, The 10 Signs That You Have High Functioning Anxiety, you need to watch this video because I'm going to share with you the things that I think Julia Kristina got right, and then also some things where I have a differing opinion than she does. I'm Heather. I'm an anxiety coach, and I personally overcame high functioning anxiety and have had the opportunity to work with hundreds of clients, enabling them to resolve their anxiety so that they can finally live the life that they want to live. Okay, so let's dive in.
You might be struggling with anxiety without actually knowing it. And I say you might not know it because when we think about someone who struggles with anxiety, often we have this picture in our head of someone who is kind of jittery and nervous and maybe, is hesitant in how they speak. But you don't show up like that. Maybe you show up kind of seeming pretty confident, pretty grounded, pretty on top of things.
I absolutely agree with Julia Kristina that high functioning anxiety doesn't look like other anxiety. It doesn't look like generalized anxiety disorder. And that is how someone can have high functioning anxiety and not even know it. So I had high functioning anxiety for at least 10 years looking back, and I didn't know it because I thought that anxiety looked a certain way and I didn't fit that description that was in my mind. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't jittery, those things that Julia Kristina mentioned. So right off the bat, I absolutely agree with her that this is really a hidden anxiety, and that is very confusing for a lot of people because high functioning anxiety doesn't look like generalized anxiety disorder.
And I want to give you first a bit of a litmus test that's going to help you get more clear about whether or not you do in fact struggle with high functioning anxiety. And that is to just take a second now and check in with yourself and ask yourself, do you often feel stressed and overwhelmed and have a really busy mind that you can't turn it off? Maybe you often physiologically feel kind of this sort of nervous kind of flipping feeling in your stomach, or like a tense feeling in your chest, or even just like kind of a hot, tense feeling in your head.
So I love how Julia Kristina said that there's this sort of litmus test. Like maybe you have high functioning anxiety if you have a really busy, overactive mind. That is absolutely true. And we're actually going to talk about that overactive mind a little bit later in the video. So if that sounds like you, you're definitely going to want to stay watching the video so you can find out about the overactive mind piece. When someone has high functioning anxiety, and this is absolutely true for me when I was really struggling, an overactive mind, a busy mind, is actually sort of an understatement. Someone with high functioning anxiety, their mind is going all the time. It's constantly thinking. And she also mentions in her litmus test that there may be some stress that comes with that overactive mind that starts to lead to body sensations. So some things that she mentioned are stomach pain or chest pain or the headache. I can say that for me, I used to get a lot of constriction in my chest when I would start to feel overwhelmed and stressed out. It would be like my chest was sort of squeezing in, and it was like a lot of pressure in my chest. That is actually the top body symptom that I hear from my clients that they feel and struggle with, is a lot of pressure in the chest. And in fact, it's not uncommon for people to go to the ER because they think that that chest pain that they are experiencing might be an actual medical emergency. That's how bad sometimes this chest pain gets. Other areas that I typically hear from people are throat sensations, like a squeezing or a constriction in the throat. And then I often hear about stomach pain as well, like severe stomach pain or this nausea that comes in, or a feeling of like a lead ball in the stomach, just like this heaviness. I haven't heard personally about the headaches or the pressure in the head as much myself, but that, of course, could be a symptom that somebody has from their anxiety.
And all this is going on the inside. But if you were to say to someone, I really struggle with anxiety, they would be shocked. They would be surprised. They would be like, no, you don't.
So that outward appearance not matching the inward state is 100% accurate. and how Julia Kristina mentioned that oftentimes if you were to tell somebody what you felt and are feeling on the inside with high functioning anxiety, people would be shocked. That is not an exaggeration. So when I was struggling with high functioning anxiety, I would often have people say to me, "Oh, Heather, you're so calm." Or they would tell me I was laid back. And I did not understand that at all because I thought that I looked like on the outside what I felt like on the inside. And so I didn't understand how people could think that I was calm because I didn't feel calm at all. And so this is why I mentioned at the very beginning of the video that I really think that high functioning anxiety is a hidden anxiety because it is so unapparent to people on the outside that somebody is struggling on the inside. And when you hear comments from people about, "Oh, you're so calm," or, "Oh, you're laid back," that really sort of perpetuates the problem because then you question in your mind, well, wait a minute, if people see me as calm, if people see me as this laid back person, maybe what's going on inside isn't as bad as I think it is. And then that just perpetuates the problem of the high functioning anxiety and someone not realizing that the way they feel inside is something that they really need to address.
Have a really big fear of failure. Failure is so strong, you might avoid doing things quite often where you're not sure what the outcome's going to be. Or your fear of failure is so intense that then when there are things that you can't avoid or get out of, you spend an intense amount of time planning and preparing and practicing and getting ready.
Oh my gosh, this fear of failure. That is so true with high functioning anxiety. And Julia Kristina sort of, delineated between this procrastination that sometimes comes in when you have high functioning anxiety because it would just be easier not to do the thing that you're afraid of failing, and or you are overworking because of this fear of failure. So this is where I slightly diverge in Julia Kristina's thinking. Of course, there are people who procrastinate because of their anxiety and because of perfectionism. That is absolutely true. I personally, from my clients and then from my own experience, would say that I don't see procrastination very often showing up in other people's lives that I work with. They tend to veer into the overwork. And that is what I did personally, just like this constant over planning, as she mentioned, this over preparing. I would edit things, I would revise things. I would spend inordinate amounts of time on things because I didn't want to fail at them. I wanted the things that I was working on to be absolutely perfect. And so for me personally, I didn't procrastinate on things. The high functioning anxiety made me want to succeed so much that I wouldn't have even thought of procrastinating because then that would have just been taking time away from the thing that I needed to work on, the thing that I wanted to succeed at. And so since I tend to work with pretty high achieving and goal oriented folks, they are sort of in the same camp that I was in, where they are over planning. They are spending too much time on things because there is this massive fear of failure. So then they're overworking. I mean, quite typically, if they have a corporate job, they are, setting very poor boundaries for themselves. They're checking email on the weekends, they're working on the weekends, that sort of thing. That definitely comes in a lot.
The next sign that there might be some high functioning anxiety going on is, like I mentioned a minute ago, you have racing thoughts and a really busy mind and can't often turn your thoughts off. And you notice yourself thinking about things a lot.
The racing thoughts that Julia Kristina mentioned is absolutely true. And we already sort of covered that with the overactive mind. But I do love the phrase of racing thoughts, right? Because that implies that there's not just this, "Oh, I'm just sort of thinking." It's like things are going real fast in your mind. And that is absolutely true for someone with high functioning anxiety. So I 100% agree with her about racing thoughts.
Which brings us to the next sign. And this happens when we have a really busy mind, is that you often find yourself tuning out or gapping out.
This concept of tuning out or gapping out is pretty interesting. And this is where I actually would, again, slightly disagree with her. So I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but this was not my personal experience with high functioning anxiety. How I would describe my mind and the not being fully present, which I definitely agree with, I wasn't fully present, but I wasn't tuning out and I wasn't gapping out. I wasn't spaced out. What would happen, it was the high functioning anxiety sort of was like two layers of my brain that were going on. So the one layer is I'm with someone, I'm listening to what they're saying, I'm taking it in, I'm absorbing it, I'm reacting to whatever they are saying. That's the first layer. But then there is this high functioning anxiety layer that is the part that will not stop thinking, those racing thoughts. So even though I was listening to someone and even though I was absorbing what they were saying and I could respond, I would oftentimes find that there was a whole different like track of my mind that was going on where I was over concerned about something, right? I was thinking about something that was happened in the past that I was very concerned with replaying that over and over in my mind, or I was concerned about something that was going to happen, right? This sort of future tripping phenomenon that happens. So I have not heard of other people saying that they find themselves spacing out or gapping out, as she says. That doesn't mean it's not happening. I just personally don't have experience with that and haven't really seen that show up in my clients' lives.
Overthink a lot. You get really stuck in your thoughts. You think about anything and everything. Maybe if it's at a social gathering or after a social gathering, you think about what you said. You think about what they said. You think about what you did. You think about what they did. You think about what you need to do. You think about what will happen if you don't do that.
The overthinking, I would say this is like the number one worst sign of high functioning anxiety is overthinking, right? So it's not just that your mind is going, it's the thinking about things. Like everything that you're thinking about seems to have so much importance. And I just mentioned the rumination about the past. So oftentimes, I would get caught in a thought loop, a pattern for weeks at a time, thinking about something that happened, a conversation that I had had that I, really wished had gone differently in some way, that I should have said something different, responded differently in that conversation. Or I would be looking at an experience that I had, feeling like I didn't do a good enough job, right? Because of that fear of failure. And oh my gosh, you did this thing and Heather, you should have done it this way and this way and this way. That would have been so much better. Why did you do it the way that you did it? And then if I wasn't doing that, I was overthinking about the future, which is really interesting, right? Because the future is is the future. You don't know what's going to happen. But people with high functioning anxiety really are so concerned about what is coming, right? Because they don't want to fail. So they're trying to anticipate what is coming their way so that they can respond in a specific manner that's going to lead to success. So with high functioning anxiety, it leads to a lot of overthinking in terms of like mental strategy. Oh, this could potentially happen. And if this happens, I'm going to respond this way. Or if that doesn't happen, another likely possibility is this, right? So it's like this mental chess game that goes on. And so I really think that overthinking is probably, again, it's hard to even phrase this with high functioning anxiety. It's like overthinking really doesn't do justice to what is going on in somebody's mind with high functioning anxiety. So it's like overthinking on steroids.
Is that you are someone who is really productive. You are good at getting things done, making things happen, staying on top of things, being the go-to person. But you often, as a result, feel burnt out. You might even feel resentful because of all the expectations.
So, this concept of being really good at getting things done, Julia Kristina is absolutely right. People with high functioning anxiety, again, because of that fear of failure, are really good at getting things done. They take care of things. They are highly successful usually. And that is part of why it is also so surprising to other people that someone has high functioning anxiety, because outwardly they look calm. They're also getting things done because they're really, really productive, really good at getting things done. And so if you think about someone with anxiety, oftentimes you are picturing somebody who is not good at getting things done, right? Like maybe an inability to leave the house, etc. So this really good at getting things done is absolutely true. Someone with high functioning anxiety will spend massive amounts of time on things, making sure they are very, very high quality, like whatever it is that they produce. And then there's this concept that Julia Kristina mentions about being burnt out or resentful. And this is where I disagree with her. I diverge from this a bit, because high functioning anxiety and that fear of failure, it's like an internal mechanism. It's coming from within, this not wanting to fail. And the expectations of other people are far less than the expectations that someone puts on oneself. That's what I personally have heard from my clients, and something that was true for me. My expectations of myself were far greater than anybody else. And so I wasn't burnt out or resentful of other people, because I was the one who was making myself do the things that I was doing. So I didn't wind up resenting people giving me things to do or having expectations of me, because their expectations of me were much lower than the expectations I had of myself. And I will say that burnt out is a thing that eventually may happen to somebody with high functioning anxiety, but it sort of takes a long time to get there. I did actually wind up getting very sick from my anxiety, because I was in that state, as I mentioned, for about 10 years and didn't know it. So I was pushing myself way too hard, but for a very, very long time. And so burnout is interesting, because high functioning anxiety can keep you in this working state for a really long time. It's like this evil little machine that runs in the background that will just keep you going and keep you working harder and harder and harder. And so you may eventually burn out, but a lot of the time people will maintain that state that they're at actually for a very long time without getting burnt out, because the high functioning anxiety continues to propel them forward.
A lot of effort into making yourself and things in your environment seem really together.
So, this concept of putting a lot of effort into making oneself or one's environment seem really, really put together, I find this really interesting. And this is where I both agree and slightly disagree with Julia Kristina. And this is much more from my own personal experience. I never felt a pressure to make myself look really, really put together. Yes, I wear makeup. Yes, I'd make sure my hair was done, but it wasn't this pressure. Let's say when I had a corporate job of, oh my gosh, you have to go and to this job and look a very specific way all of the time. If there was a day where I was like, I just put my hair in a ponytail, that was totally fine with me. So I never felt an internal pressure to show up looking a specific way. I'm not saying that doesn't happen for people. That was just not my personal experience. However, my personal experience of having my environment seem really put together was very true for my house. I had to have things tidy all of the time. I didn't like it when things were sort of out of order or laying around. It would just make me feel really discombobulated. It was like, oh, I can't concentrate until all of this stuff is put away. If there's just stuff out everywhere, that it was really bothersome to me, because it felt like things were out of order. And then I would spend a lot of time cleaning as well if somebody was coming over.
Is that you really struggle with last minute changes and really don't like spontaneity.
Struggling with last minute changes and not liking spontaneity. This is where I personally am going to disagree with Julia Kristina, and I'm going to talk specifically about the spontaneity because I think this is an interesting sort of concept to bring in. So, when I was struggling with high functioning anxiety, I actually didn't dislike spontaneity. And if somebody had invited me on like a last minute trip and I could get out of town all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I was all for it. And looking back, I understand why now. You know, that sort of vacation vibe that you get into when you're not at home. A lot of times, taking myself out of my environment, taking myself out of house or out of work, and doing something that was atypical for me actually was a really great break for my brain. And that's why I loved it. It was like I could sort of pretend in myself, like, oh, you're not at home. You can just set aside that Heather that's the perfectionist Heather and leave that over there and then go over there and have fun for a while. And that's why I would love if somebody would say, hey, let's go do this thing that wasn't sort of planned. Or let's go on this last minute trip, because I could just leave all of the worries behind. It was like kind of pretending my real life didn't exist. And all those pressures that I put on myself didn't exist. And I could just extract myself and then put myself in a completely different mindset when I would do something that was spontaneous.
Overcommit a lot.
I absolutely agree with Julia Kristina about overcommitting a lot. So when I struggled with high functioning anxiety, I would, again, there's this fear of failure that comes in. And then also there's this need to want to sort of show up and do lots and lots of things because the high functioning anxiety makes you really want to feel successful. And so this overcommitting in one's life, it can be at work, like saying yes to projects that you shouldn't be saying yes to. I used to do that at work. I had this mindset for a while, like, oh, you shouldn't say no to opportunities that come your way, Heather, because you don't know what they're going to lead to. And this could be growth in your career. So I would say yes to things that I really was not interested in, that I just didn't care about. And then I'd find myself in them trying to make everything super successful and perfect when I really didn't care about the thing that I was doing that much. And then also, the overcommitting can lead to, if you have kids, signing up for things related to your kids' school. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but then you get in it and the high functioning anxiety, is sort of making you want to have everything perfect. So then there you are in this seemingly small thing that you signed up for, and all of a sudden it's taking up too much time. And so it's the saying yes to things here and saying yes to things there. They don't seem to be that big of a deal when you are saying yes to them individually, but when you add them up, all of a sudden you are overcommitted and you're trying to make everything perfect that you have in your life. And then you are just completely overwhelmed.
You never think you're doing enough and often find yourself then taking on more.
Never thinking that you're doing enough. I agree with Julia Kristina, and that directly relates to the overcommitting, right? It's like this fear of failure coming in, this need to be extremely successful, extremely goal oriented. It's like somebody with high functioning anxiety oftentimes is going to think they're lazy if they're not constantly doing something. They're going to have a really, really long to-do list, as an example, a to-do list that is for a given day, as an example, not possible. I had a client who would say at the beginning of the day, she would make a to-do list. And as she was making it, she realized there's no way I could get all of this done in a day. Like, it's actually not possible, but she would still do it every day. And then at the end of the day, would feel bad about herself because she hadn't crossed everything off. So high functioning anxiety, again, it's that evil little machine running in the background, right? Like making you do more and more and making you feel like you're not doing enough. And then the things that you are doing, making you feel like you have to do all of them perfectly.
Can't turn your brain off at night and be able to fall asleep.
Can't turn your brain off, especially at night. I 100% agree with Julia Kristina. That overactive mind, that inability to shut off your mind, the overthinking. People that I work with have insomnia, and that is something that I struggled with a lot. I used to be able to fall asleep, but what would happen is I would usually wake up around 2 or 3. And then I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep for hours or sometimes at all. So I would be up, let's say at 3 o'clock, and then I would be up for about 3 hours, and then I'd be able to fall back asleep. And then the alarm would go off, 15 or 30 minutes later, which, you just feel freaking terrible when that happens. And this is something that I have heard from a lot of people that I worked with, the insomnia. And there was somebody that I worked with, she usually wouldn't be able to go to sleep until 2 or 3. So sort of the inverse of what I used to experience. She wouldn't be able to go to sleep until 2 or 3, and then she would sleep through until the alarm goes off. And I definitely agree with Julia Kristina about a lot of the time when you are in the high functioning anxiety day, your mind is thinking, you're focused on all of the things you're thinking about. But then when you lay down to go to sleep, your brain is like, oh, now I have time to think about whatever it is that I want. And that's where the rumination will really come in, thinking about things that happened in the past that you should have done better, right? Or the worrying about the future and what's coming up. So I really want to thank Julia Kristina for making her video about high functioning anxiety. I don't think that high functioning anxiety is talked about enough in our society. And again, since it's a sort of a hidden anxiety, so many people have absolutely no idea that they are suffering and struggling. And so I did a little Google search right before I made this video. If you go and search on the word anxiety, you're going to get back 318 million results. If you search on high functioning anxiety, you're going to get back 100 million results, which is about half, right? So it's like if you're looking for information about high functioning anxiety, you're less likely to find it than you are to find information about anxiety. So anytime someone is creating content like Julia Kristina or like me about high functioning anxiety, I just think it's incredibly helpful to people so that they can realize what is going on and then they can start making changes in their life. And so if you are ready to finally address your high functioning anxiety and actually recover from it, I would love to be a part of that journey for you. I offer one-on-one coaching, and then I also have group programs. So I will link to those in the description down below. And then I'm also going to pin a comment down below with another video about high functioning anxiety that I think you're going to find very valuable. So go ahead and watch that next. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.